Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back, and today we're going to do One Piece chapter 1064 review. Let's get into it. So the title of this chapter is Egghead's Research Stratum. So we open up the cover page and Van Augur and Aokiji have kidnapped Pudding. This is actually the first time we see a character in the cover page and in the chapter as well, since we see Van Augur later in the chapter. And this must have happened pretty recently, right before the Trafalgar Law and Blackbeard fight. So it's pretty cool to see like how this is actually like the first time that this happened. Getting into the chapter, we get back to the fight between Blackbeard and Law, and Law ends up using his awakening and uses amputate and cuts Stronger right in half, and seems that Blackbeard didn't know that Law is awakened, so he actually came in and underestimated Law right from the beginning. Blackbeard then counters with the Quake fruit using Quake Clash, and this actually ends up affecting all of Law's crew, and it creates this intense shockwave. Blackbeard just calls out how this is, you know, the old man's ability, this is Whitebeard's ability, it's so OP, right? After this, we see kind of the battle between the Heart Pirates and Doc Q. So Doc Q tries to use his explosive apples and throws them down, and Sachi actually ends up countering this by taking in some of those apples along with some water and basically shoots it back at Doc Q, and basically he ends up blowing up. So that was pretty cool. And it was also cool that he actually calls out, I feel like Oda calls out the audience here. He lets Sachi be the kind of narrator on this, and he's like, it's a big mistake to underestimate us when we grew up in harsh, cold waters in the North Blue. It was interesting how even the Blackbeard pirates underestimated the Heart Pirates' abilities in this kind of cold water arena. And Oda's just calling out the audience here because everyone's just like, oh, it's just Law 1v1 versus Blackbeard and like the rest of his crew, but in reality it looks like Law's crew can actually hold up pretty well in an actual all-out sea battle. The Heart Pirates are actually no pushovers in this scenario here. We continue on with the fight, and all of a sudden Van Augur tries to take a shot at Law right before Law uses his special ability, and right before he can do that, John Bart hops in and basically takes a blast head on. And after this, Law uses his Shock Willy ability, the same one that he used on Big Mom, and that slices right through Blackbeard, and looks like Blackbeard is basically taken out by this ability. And Van Augur even makes fun of Blackbeard. He's like, this is what you get for not having a plan and coming in like this. Blackbeard's like, no, I'm not gonna head back to the ship now. I'm finishing this. I'm finishing what I started. So at least Blackbeard has the determination to take this to the end. Law then calls out Blackbeard here, and then he says that, do all your officers have Devil Fruit powers? Because they're basically anchors in the sea, right? Because all the Devil Fruit users will just sink to the sea. And Blackbeard counters here with, the weakness is well worth it, right? So the weakness is well worth it for Blackbeard. And something I want to point out here is that Oda is definitely trying to showcase how Devil Fruits work here, because he's basically running these two storylines in parallel, how the Straw Hats are going to meet Vegapunk and find some more information about these Devil Fruits, and we're going to be seeing this Law Blackbeard fight the entire time. And I think something that Vegapunk is going to tell us later in the story is going to clarify what happens in this fight a little bit later, right? So whether that has to deal with Blackbeard's third Devil Fruit, or it has to deal with how come Blackbeard can take on multiple fruits in the first place, right? Something is going to be elucidated here for us, and it's going to be interesting. So I think that's exactly why Oda is kind of showing this fight in parallel for like the first time. This is kind of the first time we ever see a non-Straw Hat fight, right? Usually we kind of cut away from that, or we hear about that later. We hear about the Akainu Aokiji fight, right? So we never actually got to see that fight. We just hear about like what happened with Sabo. We never get to see it, right? So a lot of the fights Oda ends up just cutting away, but in this scenario, I think Oda actually wants to showcase something and kind of explain it while showing us. So that's like kind of the best way to do it. Quickly switching away here, we kind of get a quick panel of showing Pudding captured on the Blackbeard ship, and basically some of Blackbeard's crew is just telling Pudding how even though there's a lot of like noise going on, there's a lot of pounding that the ship is taking right now, that Blackbeard's gonna end up taking out the Heart Pirates anyway. Pudding just responds with, yo, if Mama is alive, she's gonna take you out, dude. If she's still alive, she's gonna make you eat those words, right? So Pudding is still very confident in Big Mom, and I think this is kind of Oda leaving it open for us to still interpret if Big Mom is still alive. And I'm guessing Big Mom's still alive. Maybe Kaido's dead, but maybe Big Mom is still alive. Is that what Oda is telling us here? We really still don't know. And right before we leave this fight between Blackbeard and Law, Blackbeard's about to use his Black Vortex ability, and I think this is the same ability he used against Ace and took Ace out. So it's going to be cool to see how Law ends up dodging this ability. We then pan away again and we go to Navy headquarters where our boy Fleet Admiral Akainu is, and he's just like, yo, I'm pissed that I can't do anything right now. All I can do is wait. And I kind of had a question about this. Why does Akainu need to wait on this topic? Why can't he just send an admiral? Are all the admirals away doing other important tasks right now, and that's why he can't go out himself, right? As Fleet Admiral, he needs to kind of be directing people around. He can't go out himself, right? So maybe all the admirals are doing important things right now. I don't know what those things could be, but maybe the world actually is going crazy and there's a lot of other stuff going on, and that's why there's no one available to kind of help in this scenario. Now panning over to Egghead Island, we see that Bonnie has aged Luffy, Chopper, and Jinbei in different ways. So Chopper and Luffy have aged up, and it seems like this is a possible glimpse in the future of how Luffy would look, right? So I think this is the if Luffy aged badly and if Luffy aged well, right? So I think this is the bad version. It's funny, Luffy's just like, yo, I get that you had to make me older, but why this old? You know what I'm saying? Like Luffy's just like, yo, you made me like freaking 90 years old, dude. I can't even move right now. Obviously Oda doesn't want to show us like adult Luffy, right? He's not gonna give us that yet, right? Maybe we'll get that at the end of One Piece. Maybe we'll have a little time skip at the end. But yeah, Oda doesn't want to give away that design yet, so he's basically giving us this old version of Luffy here. And it's cool to see that we also see like the SBS version of Jinbei, like as Jinbei as a kid, and it looks identical, right? It's exactly what Oda drew before. And Jinbei then brings up how Kuma was like a tyrannical leader, and he kind of breaks down the history that he was captured by the Navy, and the Navy found out that he had ties to the revolutionaries, and that's why they gave him a life sentence, and his only way out was basically being a specimen for the government and doing body modification and cloning. And yeah, that's why Kuma became a warlord in the first place, right? To kind of get out of that life sentence. And Bonnie states here that she understands why Kuma would have chosen to be a warlord and take those sacrifices, but what she doesn't get is why he would agree to lose his mind, right, and become a mindless cyborg. So that's still not adding up here. Something else Bonnie states is that Kuma was always part of a special race. So it's interesting to see that Vegapunk has basically been working with and modifying different special races, right? So if Kuma's race was a special race, like the Lunarian race was like one of the most special races, right? They can adapt to any environment. So it's interesting to see that like the world government was looking for these types of special races to perform these body modifications and perform these cloning to create these supreme beings, right? These super soldiers, basically. Now moving back to the Sunny, we see them getting rocket thrusted by the giant mech suit and just flying into the sky. Lilith mentions here it's an anti-grav unit jet thruster. So again, I think this is pointing out here that the Straw Hats are going to use this technology to somehow go to space, right? So they're going to equip the Sunny with some of this jet thruster anti-grav technology, and this is what's gonna get us to space. Let's go. We're going to the moon 100%. I called this way long ago. I think tons of other people called it too, but we're going to the moon. We're going to the moon for show. And so once they reach the top, the Straw Hats start seeing like actual Egghead Island. They see everyone and like the lab assistants as well. And they start running towards the island, and Zoro and Brooks actually end up staying back because they don't trust Lilith, so they're basically staying back to protect the ship. And I think this is kind of key because I think they're going to be the first people to interact with CP0. Once CP0 gets to Egghead, I think Zoro and Brook will end up meeting them first, right? And maybe that'll end up being the first battle versus taking on like Luffy versus CP0. I think if Luffy's actually involved in that fight, I think that fight will end a lot faster. So maybe if it's like Zoro and Brook versus CP0, maybe that'll be a little bit more interesting fight. Because honestly, after Luffy took down Kaido, do we really believe that he'll have any problem with Lucci? So maybe this is kind of Zoro's fight here. So we might see a little bit of that. So something else interesting here, Lilith mentions that since they can control the atmosphere of the island, they can basically create their own Pyrobloin similar to the Sky Islands, right? So that was actually pretty cool that they can replicate this technology with the Sky Islands. And right before the Straw Hats end up entering the lab, they need a change of outfit, and all the Straw Hats get a cool update on their outfit, except for Sanji. Sanji just gets a tropical shirt similar to Jinbei. It was funny to hear him say, he's just like, yo, this just screams aloha, dude. This just screams aloha. And before ending this chapter, we get some words from Shaka Vegapunk. and this is Vegapunk 01. And basically what he says is, I think I'll be dead soon. One of the bad things about being a genius is that he can basically predict the future or see the future coming, and he thinks he's gonna die. And basically, I'm guessing he understands that CP0 is coming for him, and he kind of got that information in some way. And it turns out that he was actually telling this to Dragon. So what is the connection here between Kuma, Dragon, and Vegapunk? And I think there's something very interesting going on here. So kind of my theory here, and I'm just throwing this out, right? If Vegapunk is working with Dragon this entire time, maybe they actually had control of these Pacifista and Seraphim for the revolutionaries, right? So maybe they can convert this Seraphim Pacifista army onto the revolutionary side and kind of take over the world government here. So maybe Dragon and Vegapunk have been in cahoots this entire time. This is also maybe why Vegapunk left that devil fruit, Momo's devil fruit, on Punk Hazard way back when, right? Because apparently it was, incomplete, it was imperfect, it was a failed project, right? But it clearly worked very well in replicating Kaido's ability here, right? So understanding all of that, maybe Vegapunk didn't want that crazy technology in the world government's hands, and the reason he didn't want that is because Dragon told him to. And maybe also Dragon is the reason Kuma lost his mind, right? So maybe Bonnie actually needs to be pissed at Dragon for convincing Kuma to lose his mind, right, in this process. So there's a lot of interesting connections here. I wonder what the final real connection is. I'm guessing we're gonna get an explanation a little bit later, but that was really interesting to find out that Dragon is involved with Vegapunk somehow. But yeah, that's all I've got for this chapter. I'm super hyped to see what's gonna happen next. I still think Law is gonna take down Blackbeard here, and if he ends up losing, I think he'll still be alive, and I think he's kind of this era's Whitebeard. A lot of other people were making this kind of comparison. I think Law is just gonna take a bunch of W's, right? I think he's gonna take a bunch of W's. I don't think Law is taking any L's, right? Even though his name starts with an L, he's all W's. And I think we're gonna get a cool Devil's Fruit explanation from Vegapunk soon, so I'm super hyped about that. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.